Imagine two people walking through the same city, both moving through identical streets, identical weather, identical crowds, yet experiencing entirely different realities. One notices surface-level details: where to eat, what time it is, the traffic light turning green, the simple rhythm of daily life unfolding without much interpretation. The other sees layers beneath everything. They notice economic inequality in the spacing of neighborhoods, the subtle cues in people's expressions, the political and psychological forces shaping behavior, and the invisible systems influencing every interaction. Both are looking at the same world, but one mind is filtering it through depth, patterns, and abstraction. For centuries, intelligence has been treated as an unquestioned advantage, something that guarantees better outcomes in life, higher achievement, and even greater happiness. Society praises high intelligence, rewards it in school systems, and associates it with success. Yet an unusual contradiction appears when we examine real psychological patterns. Highly intelligent individuals often report higher levels of anxiety, rumination, and dissatisfaction. This does not mean intelligence causes misery directly, but it suggests that the way intelligent minds process reality changes emotional experience itself. The brain does not simply store more information when intelligence increases. It reinterprets everything through complexity. A simple event is no longer simple. A casual conversation is no longer just words being exchanged. Every experience becomes a system to decode, and that constant decoding carries a cognitive and emotional cost that most people never consciously notice. The curse of seeing too much is not about knowledge alone, but about interpretation. A highly analytical mind rarely experiences life at face value. Instead, it constantly breaks reality into causes, consequences, incentives, and hidden structures. Watching a film becomes an analysis of lighting, framing, narrative manipulation, and production intent rather than pure immersion in story. Similarly, daily life becomes something to interpret rather than simply live. Conversations are examined for subtext, contradictions, and psychological signals. News becomes a network of biases, economic interests, and institutional motives. Even relationships can become complex models of prediction and uncertainty. This level of perception can be useful in problem-solving, but it also reduces the ability to rest inside experiences without analyzing them. The mind becomes a machine that refuses to stop interpreting. Over time, this creates a subtle form of fatigue because nothing is ever fully just itself. Everything carries hidden meaning, and hidden meaning requires mental energy to process. While others may enjoy a moment directly, the highly analytical individual is simultaneously experiencing the moment and dismantling it. That dual processing reduces emotional simplicity. The world becomes more transparent, but also more mentally crowded. What others experience as ease may feel like constant cognitive work, even during rest. Another major factor is what can be called the awareness trap. Psychological well-being is often tied to the feeling that life is manageable, predictable enough, and within a comfortable scope of control. However, higher intelligence tends to expand the perceived boundaries of concern. The mind doesn't just focus on immediate problems. It stretches outward into global instability, long-term uncertainty, existential risks, and abstract philosophical questions. Thoughts about climate change, economic collapse, aging, mortality, and randomness in human existence become more prominent. These are not irrational thoughts, but their constant presence can make everyday life feel heavier than it appears on the surface. Many people are able to temporarily set aside such questions and focus on immediate tasks or distractions. Highly analytical minds often return to them repeatedly, not out of choice, but due to pattern-seeking behavior. Questions like, what is the point of all this? Does anything I do matter? Or how can I know I'm making the right choices? Do not resolve easily. The brain continues to simulate outcomes and implications long after others have moved on emotionally. This creates mental loops where uncertainty is repeatedly revisited without closure. Over time, the accumulation of unresolved existential processing can contribute to a baseline sense of unease that is difficult to fully articulate, but consistently present in the background of thought. Overthinking is often where intelligence turns inward against itself. The same cognitive ability that allows someone to solve complex problems also enables them to simulate endless hypothetical scenarios. Before making a decision, the mind may generate dozens of possible futures, each branching into further variations. What if this choice leads to failure? What if another path would have been better? What if a hidden opportunity is being missed? What if regret appears years later? This simulation ability is powerful, but it can also become paralyzing. Instead of producing clarity, it produces too many competing versions of reality. As a result, decision-making becomes heavier and slower, because certainty feels increasingly unreachable. This is often referred to as analysis paralysis, where the act of thinking replaces the act of doing. Meanwhile, individuals who rely less on exhaustive analysis may appear more decisive and, paradoxically, sometimes more satisfied, because they commit earlier and spend less time mentally revisiting alternatives. The intelligent mind, however, struggles to shut down possibilities once they are generated. Each possibility feels like something worth considering, and ignoring them feels like a potential mistake. This creates a loop where thinking becomes endless refinement without resolution, and action is delayed in pursuit of perfect understanding that never fully arrives. Social experience is another domain where intelligence can influence emotional well-being. Humans are inherently social beings, and a sense of belonging is central to psychological stability. However, highly intelligent individuals often report a feeling of cognitive mismatch in social environments. Conversations that others find engaging may feel repetitive or lacking depth. Humor styles may not align. Interests may diverge significantly. This does not imply superiority or inferiority, but rather differences in how minds process and prioritize information. Over time, this mismatch can lead to subtle isolation, not necessarily physical isolation, but a feeling of being slightly out of sync with surrounding dialogue. Even in groups, there may be a sense of observing rather than fully participating. This can make meaningful connection harder to find, especially when depth of conversation is valued. Humans tend to bond through shared understanding, and when that understanding is harder to achieve, connection requires more effort. Many individuals with high cognitive ability describe a lifelong search for people who think in similar patterns or who can engage comfortably with abstract or complex ideas. Without that sense of mutual cognitive resonance, social interaction can feel partially incomplete, even when it is outwardly pleasant. This gap between external interaction and internal experience can quietly contribute to loneliness. Perfectionism is another psychological pattern often associated with high intelligence, particularly when combined with high achievement environments. When someone becomes accustomed to excelling or being recognized for capability, internal standards often rise in parallel. Over time, success is no longer defined as simply completing a task, but completing it in an idealized form. Anything less than optimal can feel insufficient. This creates a constant awareness of flaws, inefficiencies, or potential improvements in everything produced. While this can drive excellence, it also prevents satisfaction from fully forming. Even positive outcomes are filtered through what could have been better. A finished project becomes a reminder of imperfections rather than a source of closure. Compliments may be mentally discounted because the individual sees behind-the-scenes imperfections others do not notice. The gap between reality and ideal vision becomes increasingly visible, and intelligence intensifies that perception because it allows for more detailed modeling of how things could improve. However, since perfection is not attainable in real systems, the mind is left in a state where nothing ever fully meets internal criteria. This creates a paradox where higher ability to improve things does not translate into higher satisfaction with things as they are. Intelligence is also closely tied to emotional sensitivity in many individuals, often described in psychology as heightened reactivity to stimuli, thoughts, and emotional signals. This means that experiences of failure, criticism, injustice, or uncertainty can feel more intense and more persistent in thought. When combined with analytical thinking, emotional reactions are not only felt, but also continuously examined. A negative emotion is experienced, then analyzed, then reevaluated, and then projected into possible future scenarios. This creates a feedback loop where emotion generates thought, and thought amplifies emotion. Instead of fading naturally, feelings are extended through cognitive processing. For example, anxiety about a situation may lead to detailed mental simulations of worst-case outcomes, which then reinforces the original anxiety. This cycle can repeat indefinitely if not interrupted. The mind becomes both the observer of distress and the engine that sustains it. While this capacity for depth of feeling can also contribute to empathy, creativity, and insight, it also increases vulnerability to internal loops of rumination. The more powerful the simulation ability of the mind, the more vividly it can construct negative futures, and the more real those imagined futures can feel emotionally. Despite all of these challenges, intelligence does not inherently lead to misery. Rather, it changes the conditions under which happiness must be built. The goal is not to reduce intelligence or suppress thinking, but to learn when thinking is useful and when it becomes self-consuming. Many psychologically resilient, intelligent individuals develop strategies that balance analysis with lived experience. They learn to act without perfect certainty, to accept incomplete answers, and to step away from constant internal simulation. They build environments and relationships that ground them in reality rather than abstraction. They engage in activities that quiet excessive cognition, such as physical movement, nature, creativity, or presence-based experiences. Over time, they recognize that not every question requires resolution and not every pattern requires interpretation. There is a subtle but important shift from trying to understand everything to accepting that understanding has limits. In this sense, intelligence becomes most valuable when it is treated as a tool rather than a permanent state of being. The final paradox is that while intelligence reveals complexity everywhere, peace often comes from temporarily stepping outside of that complexity. Happiness does not require solving the full structure of reality. It requires moments where reality is experienced directly, without analysis.